Over to you.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the Lebuye Modipadi-Tsima Women Empowerment Show on Cometa Radio Podcast. I'm so excited about today's topic. Knowledge is power. I love learning and healthy debates, or rather should I say conversations. I'm the show's co-host and I'm a professional accountant. My name is Kgalmeji Pajani. I'm popularly known as Sekha. One of the mistakes we make is overlooking the importance of mentors in our life, or sponsors, or any advocate thereof. And this can adversely impact our professional and personal growth. And here at Cometa, we follow the concept of the idea. We inform and entertain, we develop and educate, we empower and support, we associate and network. That's the idea. And I will hand over to our guest, Shari. Shari, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sikha.
Can you give our listeners a brief overview of who you are and so that they can get to know you better?
Sure, I'll do that. Hi, I'm Shari Matera. I've been invited here to speak in my capacity as a professional coach, a profession which I have been a part of since my years of working at the Gordon Institute of Business Science, which is 10 years ago now, 9 or 10 years plus minus. I do work in other spaces as well. I run a training company that's called SSB Consulting, and that is the space that I work under. And then I have a coaching practice. And within my coaching practice, I see a multitude of clients. So let me just run into my history a little bit so that we have some more of a context in relation to how it is that I have found myself in the spaces that I navigate in this 2021. I started my learning career post-matric doing a Bachelor of Science with a triple major in Human Movement Science, Human Movement Studies, and Applied Physiology. And then it was converted into sports science at a later stage. And that degree doesn't exist in its entirety now. And I did that at Wits University. It's now called a Bachelor of Health Science in Exercise Science. That can only be done through med school at Wits University. I then did some work in a organization called Little Kickers, where I was the lead coach and project manager for a couple of years in order to really teach youngsters, like really young, as in between the ages of, I think it was 8 and 11, about life skills, motor skills, using football, right? And how to listen and why to listen, how it adds value, even primarily outside of the space. And that was one of my first enjoyable gigs in the sports fraternity. Thereafter, I moved to another organization as a consultant in football, where we looked after the marketing and branding needs of different football clubs, namely Moroka Swallows, Bloemfontein Celtics, Ajax Cape Town, and SuperSport United. I did that too, and I really enjoyed the job. I went to do further studies and did a graduate diploma in management business administration at business school. And then I moved to the Gordon Institute of Science, which is more of my academic work. I do lecturing, facilitation work, which I do on many different topics as well, related to how to perform better in the workplace, and also how to be a better human being for oneself, directly related to coaching. And thereafter, I worked at Old Mutual in sponsorships. I worked at ICASA in the international relations and communication space as well. And then I went and did my business full time, which is my training business and my coaching practice. So yeah, what more would you like me to say?
I guess with that, you're talking about being with Miroka Salos and you are a life coach. And I guess what people or the listeners will wonder is like, okay, when you say coaching, what do you exactly mean? Because you're talking about football. Does it mean you're talking about football in your sessions? Can we elaborate further and explain to our listeners what coaching is so that they
Yeah.
understand yeah.
Certainly, right. And I think I'm one of the few coaches who are actually also like a physical coach, in the sense of I'm a football coach. I'm a qualified football coach through SAFA, through the studies that I've done. And also I'm a coach in relation to how the mind, body, and soul works, right? In order to make you a better you. The ICF, which is the International Coach Federation, defines coaching as partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential, which is particularly important in today's uncertain and complex environment. Coaches honor the client as the expert in his or her life and work and believe every client is creative, resourceful, and whole. And really, for you as a coach, we have a great amount of responsibility in the work that we do, because we guide the learning of self by self through discovery, ensuring that you get to discover, clarify, and align with what you are looking to achieve. We encourage the self-discovery processes. It's an illicit client-generated solution that gets developed and also that gets strategized by you as the client. So coaching is really something that is oftentimes confused with other disciplines such as therapy, consulting, mentoring, which we have oftentimes heard of in the workplace, and also in our lives. Those are things that we've come across often. And the discipline of professional coaching itself is developing, and it is finding more and more feet, right? So all the learnings that we do, we get trained to become professional coaches, with everything, all the other qualifications that you have. We find that it is very useful for an individual who is a professional coach to understand the context within which they operate, right? And for me, most of my coaching takes place in the business context. And that's why my title is that I'm an executive business coach. And I also use neuro-linguistic programming as a way of assisting clients in navigating their journey towards understanding themselves in the biggest scheme of things.
Okay. And with that, you mentioned, because I want to touch on the executive business coaching and what type of services that you can offer an individual. You also mentioned that coaching can be regarded, or there's a thin line between coaching, therapy, consulting, and mentoring. And I think what caught my attention there was on therapy. I would have interpreted coaching to be therapy. I get there and I explain my lack of maybe professional development or growth and pour out my heart. And at the end of the day, I will still come up with tools. How do you actually say this is, how can one differentiate between therapy and how do you draw the line when you're offering me that service and actually say, Saka, right now, I think you're making me your therapist as opposed to your coach?
And that's the power of discernment that we as coaches have to hold ourselves accountable to, right? And a lot of what we do is about not bringing myself into your coaching session, but bringing the process into the coaching session. So I need to, number one, place my ego outside of the room when I have conversations with my clients in order to ensure that I honor their process and I give them the opportunity to pour out whatever is going on for them, right? And in pouring out what is going on for them, there are limitations. So as a coach, I am not a psychologist, so I don't deal with a lot of aspects that are deep. For example, trauma, for example, depression, for example, like a lot of people are coming and speaking about how do they deal with death, for example. Those are not the conversations that we take you through, because I'm not there to advise you, but I'm there to take you through what you know and what information you can take yourself through, right? Whereas a therapist comes from a different space in relation to that. And of course, yes, there's a lot of overlap that does take place, which is also why as professional coaches, it is our duty to ensure that we educate ourselves extensively, because a lot of us come from therapeutic backgrounds. There are many coaches who are actually full-time practicing psychologists as well, right? And then there's other that from, like, I come from the sports science and in business, and then they move in. So more and more you know about therapists actually do, which situations it is easier for you to also draw the line. The line, you learn to draw the line, because I too have to go and see a therapist, right? So as part of the professional coaching work that I do, I have a mentor coach, I have a supervisor coach, and I have a therapist that I have to go and see in order to ensure that I present myself to my coachees with the utmost integrity and in a way that I can ensure that I honor their process of growth, which is what coaching is there to facilitate.
Okay, that's very lovely that you highlighted that, because personally, I wasn't aware that someone can misinterpret, but when you explained it, that one can interpret it as therapy as opposed to a development plan or coming up with a proper plan to assist themselves personally. Then we're also talking about issues of mentoring. I guess that's the other challenge that a coach can experience in their life, when they have to draw the line between when they are a mentor and when they are a coach. And with those two roles that they play, what is the differentiator there? How do you know when you are being a mentor, and how do you know when you're being a coach?
Yeah. So that is a discipline on its own, number one, right? And in a professional coaches session, you should not be finding yourself mentoring, because mentoring itself is a practice where one helps those with less experience to sort of work themselves up their ladder or up the chain, right? Your mentor would generally have more experience in those aspects that you need development in, and they would literally advise you, how about you try this, how about you try this, oh, this is what I've done, what are you thinking are the things that you would be able to do. Oh, okay, this has worked for me, this has worked for. In coaching, you never hear a thing like, oh, this has worked for me. That's not what our work is. But our work is to help you navigate and understand what has worked for you through your own experiences, maybe in a different context. But it's about, how do I help you see that you are whole, resourceful, and capable? Yes, you've done it in a different context before. So maybe, just maybe, if you try to do it in this context, it would work. And I then need to give you the let's say the confidence in yourself to be able to execute accordingly, right? And that's one of the differences in mentorship and the practice of mentorship.
Yeah. And I guess when we were talking about that was also around how do we then, because we can see all these aspects are important in order to step up. You need coaching, you need mentorship, you also need therapy, because if you're not well mentally, you can't achieve what you need to do. So what can the youth do? Because we know, especially as millennials in the workplace, right? One of the common thing that we experience is around what do they think? Job hopping or not being happy. Maybe sometimes we know it's linked to the type of management, maybe the culture in the company. How can they go about in their normal day to day, especially even as women, because we also have demanding aspect in our own life, being parents or even being friends, or having to balance our life and our work life. How can one go about in those processes, especially women?
So for me, I would always say, let's start first of all as being human, right? And look at yourself holistically. Because whether you are in your house and you are visiting friends and family, or whether you are in the workplace and you are meeting with line managers, bosses, team members, subordinates, etc., you are still a person first, right? So when it comes to looking at your own value, you need to look at yourself in more than one way in order to be effective. And even when you put plans forth, you should look at yourself and say, okay, I'm planning to do this, this, and this on many different levels. Not just, oh, okay, I want to get a better job. So in order to get a better job, I must go and study this and that degree. That's never going to be enough, because you need to still be able to be emotionally well, psychologically well, physically well. You have to have your spirituality in check. All of that matters. And when you as an individual approach different tasks, then you can start segmenting yourself. Oh, and remember, I'm a woman. Oh, and remember, I'm a man. Or remember, I'm non-binary. Or remember that I am a millennial. Or, oh, wait, maybe I'm over 60. This means I'm in a different generation. And this, there are various characteristics and traits within which I've heard that people say, well, like this, maybe let me understand what that means for me now, in 2021. So for me, it really starts with being human first and really looking at yourself in those different facets. And then when we're looking at the South African context, right? Because it's not only about, oh, okay, let me navigate the world and see what happens. It's also about how does South Africa relate to the rest of the world, and how do you become impactful in so doing? Because we do have a lot of issues that are unique to South Africa. And in the same way that we have issues, we have a lot of positives and perks that help us in South Africa, right? And we ultimately need to compete. So when you are seeking to be coached, when you are seeking to be mentored, when you are seeking therapy, you are seeking to improve. You are looking for success in some realm or a measure of success, right? Because that's also another big word that we like to use, success. So for me, when I look at millennials, I always say, teach yourself to not be bound to the outcome. Enjoy the journey, because there are a lot of events that are going to take place that are going to break you, that are going to make you. And being resilient is more important than anything else, right? And look at us now. We've been sitting in a pandemic. And if anything, South Africa is finding itself in the most traumatic space in relation to COVID-19. Even the first wave, we were not as freaked out as we are now, right? And those are things I'm constantly seeing in daily sessions, in conversations with people, where people are extremely anxious because of not knowing what the future holds. And yes, none of us know what the future holds, but what are we going to do differently in order to ensure that we are a little bit more comfortable as we proceed? And then when I look at women, I'm also reminded that, so this is something that happened. This is a conversation we have a lot in coaching sessions, where we first need to define what you see yourself as a woman, because our society is structured very differently to how a lot of the textbooks are that we read, textbooks are that we have been taught from. We come from a highly patriarchal society, very traditional society. People have predetermined roles and responsibilities in relation to the family you come from, in relation to the culture that you ascribe to, in relation to your ethnic being, right? And we need to acknowledge all of that in order to ensure that when the coachee comes up with their solutions, they understand who they are and what their limitations are. But beyond limitations, what the possibilities are as a result of those limitations that have been acknowledged. So a big portion of the work that we do is creating self-awareness. And the more self-awareness you are able to create or connect the golden thread. You as a woman, for you as a human, it has to navigate this whole to come up with the potential gains that are going to help you survive the way you.
Shari, I think we lost you there when you were talking about the self-awareness and the importance of us being self-aware and the values that we live by. Yes.
Yeah, Shari, we're losing you. Your connection is cutting off. Sorry.
Okay. Is the line clearer now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So I was saying that the professional coaching space really helps to elevate your level of self-awareness. And in understanding or better getting to know the self as the coachee, the coachee is then able to connect dots with more ease and be able to also build the life skill of not having to consistently come back for coaching sessions, right? And that's another different thing about therapy and coaching. We sort of coach you out of our system. So the point is that as a professional coach, I don't want to see you all the time, because then what are you learning, right? It's really about you getting so self-aware, self-regulated, that you are able to come up with your own solutions consistently, even about things that we haven't yet spoken of, or about topics that is yet to come for you in the future, right? But you should feel so equipped because of your improved self-awareness, that you can tackle pretty much anything, right? And when you do hit a stumbling block, that's maybe when you'll come back for a couple of coaching sessions in relation to a specific topic.
Okay. Can I interject there? When you're talking about you give the individual tools to be self-aware, does it mean as part of a coaching process that includes a bit of psychometric assessments there?
Yes. Yes, that's one of the tools that we use, and we generally do that prior to a session. We also do 360-degree assessments in the workplace where we get feedback in relation to the behavioral traits that you exhibit. For example, what the perspectives are of your line managers or people at that level, what the perspective is of your colleagues, what the perspective is of your subordinates, so that we're working with also tangible feedback, right? And why that is important is because then those around you are also able to navigate the change and see the change and measure, in inverted commas, the differences that they do see. Because if you come to a coaching session and you have a goal to say, Shari, I'd like to be less annoyed in meetings, so I'd actually like to give people more of an opportunity to talk. Mm-hmm. There are ways in which that can be measured, and we do use, for example, a 360-degree report feedback to do that, and it does help a lot so that you can sort of watch your steps towards achieving your goal. So it's not only psychometric assessments. There are many different ways in which we do assess individuals to get a starting point, and then we, from that point, determine what the desired outcome is, which they would like to achieve through the sessions. And oftentimes, you don't really get to do everything, and then there's sometimes where there's coachees who come with one objective, and before you know it, they've already sorted that difficulty or that challenge, and then they can add more to their list because maybe they've got a few sessions left with you. So it's quite flexible in how it operates as well.
Okay, so it's like I'll get there and I'll have this a full-blown. Obviously, I have to know what I'm working towards, and once I've achieved that goal, then I can move and tap into the other developmental areas or even my strength to maximize the person I am.
Yes, right. And flexibility is key.
Then in terms of, because we also spoke about issues of people being deliberate, and that's part of the steps that will come out of coaching, and that's one of the setbacks that people don't look at, which is around their time management. How do they become deliberate in their normal day-to-day when it comes to who they are, where they direct their energies and focus?
Being deliberate is a skill, because life is life. You are just a vessel moving through this life on earth, right? And there's a lot that happens for you. And I do find that many individuals have not taken the time to think, right? So there's a great psychologist named Nancy Klein who speaks about time to think. And in time to think, it's about taking the time to reflect on who you are, where you're at, how you're going to move forward on a consistent basis, right? So in your development as a human being, you do need to, I hear a lot of noise. You do need to have practices that allow you to be a better you. And in allowing you to be a better you, you have to be deliberate in many things that you do. You also have to be deliberate in the boundaries that you set. You have to be deliberate in how far or how near you hold certain people to your soul. Because there are some people that are good for you, there's others that are not good for you, right? And they often use words like, this individual is actually toxic in my space. And then, this person actually lightens my weight. They're good for my soul. And be purposeful in those choices. Be purposeful in who you have around you, what you do, when you do things, and why you do things. Because all of that makes you who you are, the person who you are listening to this podcast now, the person who you are speaking to us all day and all night, right? So it really does become important for you to understand why you do what you do and when you do what you do consistently.
I guess it even starts with self and not just waiting up on maybe your employer or even if you run your business for an event to happen. Because what I guess we also fall short of is like what should we do as individuals or even companies to stay adaptable and flexible in everything we do.
Yes.
And with that, after you've discovered yourself, now you are in this company, how do you blend yourself in that company, and how do you become adaptable, or maybe the company vice versa meet you halfway?
And so I'm a millennial, by the way, right? And though that is I think that is not even a millennial issue. I think that is anyone that enters a new company issue, and it becomes more and more point of anxiety when you are new to the world of work, because actually you don't know what is coming ahead. You don't know what's going to happen, or how things happen, or why things happen in the workplace, right? Why can't I CC so and so when I send an email? And those are the company dynamics. So how you blend into a company is to understand the context within which you're operating. Because there are ways in which people do things, and those are the things that are not written in the policies and procedures. Those are not the things that's going to be in the handover document should you receive one, right? Those are the things that will not be part of the company induction. It is not part of the brand. It is not part of how the organization will be sold to you. But those are, honestly speaking, I think the most important things of an organization are the things that are not said. The unsaid aspects are the nuances that make or break individuals, right? And in acknowledging that that is not how organizations are currently operating, I'm not saying that that is how it should stay, but I do hope, and with more and more of these leadership programs, that I get the opportunity to work on, we see that more and more employees in organizations start to see the person as a whole being. You're not just Shari the professional, right? Or you're not just Sikha the accountant. They understand that you are a whole being, that you have a whole life, and all of those things are carried in your heart, mind, body, and soul. And when blending into a company, you do need to ensure that you bring all of you. Because when you bring all of you, you give yourself the opportunity to also listen with more than your ears. Listen with your eyes. Listen with your spirit. Understand that the gut feel exists. Right?
Shari, we have Tembela now joined the Speakers Forum. She can be part of your conversations, colleagues.
Sure. Good to see you, James.
Thank you. Just battle with technology a bit, but I'm here. Yeah. I've been listening in.
Okay. Good. So should I finish my stuff on blending into a company?
Please go ahead.
Cool. Right. So in blending in, you need to also, look at politics of the organization itself and the people who are there, because you are also dealing with other people who have the same emotional, psychological, physical, spiritual levels that you do. They might not identify with the principles that you do, but they exist, right? And they too are multifaceted. And you do need to recognize that in when you look at how you're going to blend into a company. And yeah, coaches do help with those conversations, because I would ask you about those different levels of operation. Have you thought about it from this perspective? How has it affected you? When you've walked into a meeting and everybody's looking at you, and suddenly you've got to do something that you were not even prepared to do, right? So there's a lot that goes on. And as a coach, the coach focuses on the coachee, and then the coachee focuses on the content. And the coachee navigates the journey. The coachee comes up with the solutions, right? They are the ones who are going to decide how exactly am I going to blend into the company. But within the session, they may have navigated 10 or 20 different options. And what they settle on is also about what they feel is necessary at that moment in that time.
That's very lovely. And I guess to the listeners, we need to introduce another life coach on the show, Thembela. Can you introduce yourself to the listener, my co-host?
Thanks, Sikha. So my name is Thembela Khosani. I am a recently certified life coach, and really my passion lies with empowering women and allowing them to use their voices to sort of chart out and achieve the changes that they want to see in their lives. So I can identify with a lot of what Shari has spoken about, and for me, one of the questions that always comes up is mentorship and coaching a nice to have or a must have? And Shari, what would you say to that?
I definitely say it's a must have. I just do think that oftentimes we know finances comes into the play. So for me, I think I do in 4 different organizations. I volunteer my time, right? I volunteer as a coach and I volunteer as a mentor, because I also know that the service is expensive. The service was expensive when I was younger, so I needed to seek out, who do you know that knows so-and-so, because I want to actually have so-and-so as my mentor, right? And because I know it's a must, I will always seek it out in all my different disciplines that I work in as an individual, but I also encourage others to do that. And also, you don't just seek out a coach or a mentor for the sake of, I must have a coach, I must have a mentor. No. Understand what it is you're looking for before you even decide on a coach and a mentor. Like, what do I want? Do I want to do this for myself? Like, do I want to be a millionaire, but I don't know how I'm going to get there? That's not going to be helpful when you're going to have the opportunity to speak to an executive coach like Shari, because you're wasting your own money. Like, literally, you're wasting your own money. You have to show up with, okay, this is what I've thought of so far, but these are my struggles, these are the things that I've been doing. This has worked, this has not worked. So for me, mentoring and coaching and therapy are important. Those things are essential in order to ensure that you make yourself as whole as you can fathom. Because only once you are in the space of professionals do you realize that you have a much greater capacity than what you are currently aware of.
And I guess with that, it also triggers the issue of, we understand that coaching is expensive, and even before you can step there, because you need to go to a coach knowing exactly what you want to achieve. and the structures that exist, like your peers, that you can identify a peer or someone who has achieved what you want to achieve or want to achieve what you want to achieve before approaching a coach. So with that, how can one go about before even approaching a coach, considering this peer-to-peer mentoring and using those structures that exist for themselves?
I've seen that there are many organizations, and also within the organizations, there's like mentorship programs, coaching programs that happen internally. Take advantage of that, number one. Number two, Google is your friend, man. Search. Try and see what coaching is, what coaching has achieved for other people, you know. And also know who you are, what you want to achieve, what you want to achieve holistically. Not only, I need to finish my master's, I need someone to do this and this for me. No, that's not going to be enough. Say emotionally, I know that, okay, I'm going to attain my master's next year. That means maybe I'm going to be available for different jobs. And in those different jobs, maybe going to take more time from me, or my stress levels are going to increase. Am I going to be able to cope with more stress and less time on my hands? How will that affect my life? Because maybe my life involves a partner. Maybe it involves children, you know. Maybe it involves traveling a lot. You are the one who knows your circumstance. So you are the one who should be chartering that for your sake, you know, to just grow and be better. And another thing for me is, before you even select a coach, understand who you want and not who by name, right? So what are the characteristics that you're looking for in this coach? Because now you know, okay, these are the things that I want to achieve. I want to run let me make an example like myself. I want to run a training company where there's at least one training institution on each continent. So who do I think will be a good option of somebody who understands the mechanics of getting that right? Do you think it's going to be useful for me to only go to my church pastor and say, this is my dream? Can you mentor me? I don't think that's going to be helpful for me, right? But if I speak to the CEO of Udemy, for example, or if I speak to the CEO of Henley or of Gibbs or of Duke or of USB Ed or of Wits University, if I speak to the vice chancellor, yeah, maybe there's a chance that they've seen this path before and they would be the ones who could guide me in relation to that, right? And then when I look for a coach, I also maybe need a big dreamer kind of coach. Somebody who's going to probe and ask me such great questions that's going to push me to think beyond my existing borders in ways that they've probably seen happen. So they can ask me questions in relation to the possibility of what life actually has out there, right? And you do need to do a lot of research. Do your homework, reflect on your goals and objectives, interview at least 3 coaches, eh? And we often find, when someone likes you, then they don't want to go and interview other people. Because yes, it is a very emotive way of working. Coaching and you know, doing chemistry sessions is highly emotional. Because you find that, oh wow, I was able to be so vulnerable with this person. Now I have to go and look for 2 more coaches. No, I don't want to. I always suggest, please go and get 2 more coaches, interview them, and then when you come back, they would have given you ideas of things that could make the coaching sessions you have with Shari Matera way more impactful. Because obviously there's only so much time we would have had in our session to speak, right? And always confirm the credibility of the coaches that you are working with. Please always confirm the credibility of the institutions where they learned at, right? Because you don't just want someone who's a coach because, oh, okay, they've got a certificate. You want to know that they've been taken through their paces and that they are held to a very high standard, and that they practice from a place of integrity, you know. And as much as them having nice human characteristics like being creative, intuitive, empathetic, being a discerning listener, that they're actually very well trained in relation to behaviors and competencies, etc., etc. Because that does make a difference. And coachees only see the difference at the point where they meet a very well-trained professional coach. And they're like, oh, wow, this was very different to what I've previously had. But I do think it's important to do all of that before settling on a coach or a mentor. Like, you've got to do your homework.
You know, one of the things that I love about coaching, Shari, is that the results do not have to take forever, right? And this is what makes coaching so impactful. And when you see your clients, like on average, how long would you say you see a client? Is it like a 2-year journey that you spend on average with a client, or is it even shorter than that?
Much shorter than that.
Yeah, you're right. Can you speak to that a bit? Yeah.
Yeah, like if someone is sitting with me for 2 years, hey, I think I'm going to have
a problem
with my work. Like, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. Because then I'm not pushing this person hard enough. I am not holding them accountable to the process well enough. Because the aim is for me to coach you out of my system. I'm not supposed to. You're not supposed to be my monthly. You're not supposed to be my monthly income. Like, if that happens,
and almost become dependent on your coach.
Yeah, no. That's not the type of relationship we're here to build. That is something that happens in the therapy space, right? Where okay, this is going to take a long time for me. No. We don't do that. So in the professional coaching space, yeah, we I don't really say we are results driven as the coach. Nope. The coachee may be results driven, but I'm really not committed to the outcome. That's not my job. I'm committed to the process, because when we get the process right, you're going to be able to emulate that process next month, next year, in 10 years' time, because that is the skill that you need to also learn in our sessions, right? And how do you take time to think? How do you step back, sit down, and think about, oh, okay, this is my issue. Where is it actually originating? So no, they will not be with me for 2 years. The minute I'm actually trying to think how the longest. Well, but you see what happens is people come for a certain amount of time, then they'll take a break, and then they'll come back again for something different. Then they'll take a break, and then they'll come back for something different. So there are people who I've seen year on year, but not for the same thing. And when it's the same thing, that thing actually looks very different, because now we're dealing with a different kind of coachee, a coachee that is a lot more self-aware and has probably dealt with that same issue, but on 4 or 5 different levels already. Yeah, and now we just need to help the person understand it on a more minute level.
So if I have to add, so coaching, it's more of a permanent nature. Once I leave that session, I have a life tool that in any situation that are similar, I'll be able to navigate independently as far as possible.
If you
guideline and not instructional. Yeah, I think that's the two differentiator, that if it's a guideline, you can navigate any situation. But if it's a rule, then it becomes hard for you to actually move forward.
Sure, that's a possibility if you take the responsibility of doing your after work, right? So in the coaching session, you're going to make decisions and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that. But if you do not follow through, you're failing your process.
But what about the fact that, as individual, we subconsciously or unconsciously default to self? yeah, you will go back to zero, the old person that you were in.
Yes, and that
How do you navigate that?
Yeah, that is why I say it's important for you as the coachee to hone that skill. You have to practice. Like, that's not even optional. You have to put the solutions that you have come up with into practice. You have to monitor that, right? So also, I never have a coaching session 1 week after the other. Most of my coaching sessions are separated by 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. Because remember, you need to go practice those things that you've said you're going to do. Because guess what? You are human and you will fall into default. That's a guarantee. And let me quickly explain to you the neuroscience behind why you will fall into default. So, number one, we are human beings. We have a mammalian brain, right? So we will either respond, and we're going to respond as fight, flight, or freeze. All of us. Even me, Ashari. Even the most richest people, the most thoughtful people, those are our basic responses. And everything that we do goes down to that when we do respond. And you need to understand such basic things, because you must automatically be, so like me, I'm a fighter, right? That is something automatically that happens for me in all circumstances. And fight happens differently, right? So fight sometimes happens as you're going to have a harsh response, or fight means I'm not even going to think about something, I'm going to have a knee-jerk response. Fight could mean that you're going to physically fight, but obviously, like, I'm grown up for that now. But you need to understand that, like, to even make a statement like, oh, I'm grown up for that. Oh, okay, no, I'm done with that life, right? It's after school is no longer after school, hey? Like in primary school, you fight with me. I used to fight, right? In primary school, I'd hit you if you hit me back, and I'll hit you back.
Sure.
Because that is how I was geared. And to this day, I often see how it presents itself differently. Even in the way I type messages. Oftentimes, when I type, I'm so direct that it could be perceived as a fight. And so I've had to teach myself. I've had to unlearn and relearn ways of writing messages differently. And I consistently have to do that, because there are times, for example, when there's a death in the family of someone who's close to me, I know I'm in high stress levels, right? And the neuroscience says I flip my lid. So guess what? My responses will always be fight. So if someone comes and they upset me, I'm going to have a quick response. I'm going to have a response that will be probably rude. I'm going to have a response that's going to be so direct, and so it's going to like cut them off, right? So I must be aware of that. And it's practiced consistently all my life that I will need to bring myself down. No. Get away from that movement. Get away from there. Because all stress, our body only knows how to respond in fight, flight, or freeze. Yes, it is covered by many different behaviors. All those behaviors is what makes us different. All those behaviors are the things that set us apart, right? And those behaviors is what we call EQ, that emotional quotient, emotional intelligence. Because that is how the bigger scheme of things will operate, and the world will judge you based on your behaviors.
But yeah, so the world will judge you on your behavior, because isn't it lately what they actually saying is that EQ is more important than IQ, that you need to be emotionally grounded. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are. And is that part of the benefits of coaching that will come out of there?
Yeah. Yep. And I do think that's why there's so much more investment in engaging the working world in a more holistic way, than not just, oh, okay, we know you're smart, this is what you can do. But it's really also about how you do it, who you do it, how you lean on others, right? Because it really doesn't help that you're such a high performer, you're the superstar engineer, and you being the superstar engineer, you suffer from burnout every 2 years. And when you suffer from burnout, it means that there was probably a month or two before that burnout where you were not your effective self, and 2 or 3 months after that where you need to recover from the mental exhaustion that you have put yourself through, because the body can really only handle so much.
And that mental exhaustion will come from the concept of the little voice. Can you explain to me, when they talk about the little voice, what is the harm that that little voice can actually do to you?
Ish. You know, the little voice is so much it's really very much pinned in the imposter syndrome, which we often hear of and speak of. And that little voice is a voice of doubt that comes up for people, right? And many people can even put faces behind the voices of doubt that they have now inherited. So someone said something to them once, twice, thrice, 4 times, and what they have done is now taken the job of that person and carried the little voice on their behalf. And what they do is that they hold themselves accountable to the little voice, forgetting that the little voice is an event in your journey, forgetting that the little voice is actually a small part of your story until you give it the power, until you allow it to dictate who you will be versus the mistake that you may have made, right? And that is something that we all struggle with. We just have to be more and more aware of what our little voices say, because we have many different little voices that play up in different spaces. I've had a client, well, a few clients actually, who don't feel ready for a promotion, for example. And when you look at it on paper, you're like, say what? You don't feel ready? Like what? Like, okay, so that will be my conversation with myself, right? Like, what? You don't feel ready? Like you're the smartest in the room. Yeah, and you're the youngest, but like you're the smartest, number one. And other people have shown that they trust your processes that you've been going through in order to get here. And then you find out that it's actually the little voice. Because when I was in first year, I failed this and that subject. And as a result, I feel that that will probably be my downfall when I'm sitting on Exco. And then you really, so as a coach, I always help the coachee navigate as to what the biggest scheme of things really is. And even what the biggest scheme of things around that table is. Yeah, you're an Exco. Yeah, should that happen, cool. But what are you going to do then? Right? When you came across that situation in first year, it was probably 15 years ago. Cool. What have you learned since then? What are the capabilities that you have in your suitcase that you can call on while you're sitting around that table, because you've got 15 years more experience from that situation? And we don't really take the opportunity to stand on the balcony to look down and see what's happening on the dance floor as people. We just go into panic mode. And that is an essential skill, to step back and watch the chaos, watch your little voice operating there. See, how is my little voice going to serve me in this situation? And how is it going to detract from the capabilities that I actually know I have. Well, actually, let's just look at my performance record. It's there, right? So you do need to monitor your little voice when it shows up, and when it's not there, don't even ask where are you, what's going on with you. Like, please don't feed the monster. Please don't even feed the monster.
I guess that's it, and I guess a common one it's around speaking, that we generally don't find our voice. We as individuals generally expect someone to speak on our behalf, or even read what's in our mind and not voice what is it that we want. And the impact that it can have when you want something, just state it the way you want it and not what you think the other person will think you want, because what you will get is what you slightly said as opposed to what you actually want.
Can I be honest about that, Sikha? That's such an important point, right? And what I've realized, even in the workspace, right, you can tell people who were affirmed at a young age and were allowed to use their voice, to even be curious and ask questions. And I've seen how when you're not raised that way, where there's nothing in your background or in your upbringing that kind of allowed you to say, I'm not comfortable with this. I mean, think of us. Like, I know growing up, if anything was changing in my life, my parents told me about it. I was not consulted. It was not a case of, how do you feel about this? What do you think? It was, this is what's happening, So I think it's so important to allow people the opportunity to voice how they feel, the way that they feel it, in a way that they are comfortable expressing that. And I think that's what the coaching sessions allows one to do, to be able to express things that maybe there are no safe spaces for you to express sometimes. But it also goes back to, does anything in your upbringing, did it afford you that opportunity to be able to be assertive and speak your mind and say what you want to say, And I find a lot of people, like in the workplace, struggling to speak up, or just in life in general, struggling to just say, I'm not comfortable with this, or this doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, that's very true, because everybody falls into that trap, because even like you say, as you grow up, whenever you have a contradiction or anything contradictory to say, society will tell you you're picking up a fight, you're causing unnecessary fights, to an extent that when you feel something is contradicting or it's not achieving what you wanted to achieve, subconsciously you will default to not speaking.
Right.
That's so powerful, Yeah, I'm going to take it there. So let's just understand, the Black child has a different story. And we often walk into the workplace and then it becomes a racial thing. Now we're like, all the white kids, they're so confident. No, dog, it's not that the white kids are confident. Yeah. They practice this their whole life. Right? We are governed in our households, and we are told what not to do. We are not told, sharp, go do that, go try. We are said, no, don't do this. Now, I was a naughty child. Like, I was very naughty. I know a lot of no's, right? And in getting my no's, my mom was also very, very, very purposeful, right? So that takes us back to earlier on conversation about being deliberate. My mother was very deliberate about giving me a voice as a young girl, because that is the same voice that is going to need to speak out against the wrongs of society, against the wrongs that could potentially happen to her, right? So the parenting conundrum is a very difficult thing, because yes, you want your child to follow the rules, but they also need to have a level of freedom where they are comfortable to speak about the uncomfortable stuff.
Exactly.
When they are uncomfortable about how a neighbor has looked at them, or so and so came to ask for you at the gate, when they know that, oh, okay, your mom is not home, why are they even here, right? Those are the small dynamics that get shut down because a child is told, no, it's not your turn to speak. So we must watch. Number one, when you know better, you can do better, right? So we now know better, and we do need to parent differently. But we also need to understand that because of where we come from and what we come with, and the rules and the regulations we were raised with, which all brought us to where we are now, right? It has given us our current success. It has in some ways not served us. And where it has not served us, we need to teach ourselves. Cool. Maybe I'm in this platform or in this context, I must do this. In this context, I must do this. In this context, is going to help me do something different. And I'm telling you guys, I speak to managing directors. I speak to big executives where this is an issue, where this exact thing about knowing when to speak up, how to speak up, and really not holding themselves accountable to the judgment is oftentimes a struggle. is a big, big struggle, right? And you even find that speaking out has now been pinned to defiance. So I speak out because I want to be defiant. As a young Black woman, I speak out because I want to be defiant. Not I speak out because it's the right thing to do. I speak out because these people need a voice. I speak out because I want to be supportive. I speak out because I do think that this thought process needs to land on the table. Right? So there's a lot of those nuances that we also need to manage in ourselves as we grow older, as we move into different spaces where we are able to be powerful differently. So it's like every right also has a responsibility, and we need to exercise that as we move into different spaces.
I guess what you're also alluding there is that it's not about what you say, it's how you say it. So you need to look at the communication style that you're using so that whoever you're conversing with and what message you want to relay becomes as impactful and it lands to that person's ear in the most respectful manner.
Agreed.
Guess we had our aha moment there. Yeah, okay. Then, I guess with that, then the other topic that we haven't dealt or touched into is around agreements, mentorship agreements or other coaching agreement. How can one go about ensuring that content, I guess it speaks to the person knowing themselves, the importance of drawing up that agreement and making sure and holding yourself accountable to that mentorship or coaching agreement.
Yeah, that's something that really falls within self, right? Because it's about self-management, and beyond self-management, agreements are really it's really as good as the paper you put it on. So for example, my coaching agreements is really just it's a framework, right? And it's about basic things, literally basic things like time. Like you forfeit a session if you cancel a session 24 hours before, for example. It's about, this is how you book a session. Show up mentally ready, come with an agenda. Describe what coaching is. Like, that's really what the coaching agreement itself is. It's simple, but it is a way in which you can govern your relationship so that you also, as a coach, help the coachee hold themselves accountable. So they know now what they're signing up for after they've signed your agreement. And the agreement is, for me, very, very, very important because that is the overarching agreement of the entire relationship. And then when you move into the sessions, there are different agreements that you actually have to come up with then, right? Because so there might be an overarching theme over the grouping of sessions. Let's say, for example, okay, my coachee is looking for 10 sessions and we're like, oh, okay. So what is your overall vision when you're looking at these 10 sessions? What do you want to achieve? Like, because we would have discussed where you're at. So what do you want to achieve in the bigger scheme of things? Then we understand, okay, over these 10 sessions, this is where you want to go. Okay. Then we agree, okay. Agreement number 3 is, what do you want to speak about today that is going to help you in your steps to getting to there where you want to be at session 10? Right? And that's really the 3 different ways in which I look at my agreements with the coachee, because for every session, I also have to prepare. Yeah, sure, I'm going to sit with you for 60 minutes or 90 minutes, but it's probably going to take me 2 hours to be ready for your session, because I go through all our previous sessions. I make sure that I know who you are in my heart, what you've told me before, because remember, my job is to focus on you, and you are supposed to focus on your solutions. So I am the one who will draw connections to, oh yeah, you said that 2 sessions ago, right? And you said it in relation to this, this, and that. Speak to me about how what you said 2 sessions ago carries meaning now in this situation that you have tabled here. Because that is the work that you do as a coach, to help connect dots, to help surface connections or repetition of behavior, and to really pull out on positives, right? Okay, let's speak about the things that have served you. You've told me about an incident like this and this and this before. It sounds very similar to what you're saying today. Could you just create or draw some parallels between the two for me? That's like literally the type of connections that we speak of.
So, with you being in coaching, right, Shari? And you've been like over 17 years in the game now?
17 years working, 10 years coaching.
Wow. Okay. So, coaching for 10 years. And coaching is still relatively young in South Africa.
True.
Still very new industry. Yes. And I'm just wondering, in terms of how can we sort of like pioneer in that space in getting coaching to be more of a mainstream? I mean, obviously cost is one of those barriers that makes it not as accessible to a whole lot of people. But I'm just wondering, in the corporate space, how can we start to get buy-in, so that it's not just used as like a reward incentive for specific individuals, but then it really becomes part of the holistic offering, for employees to really be empowered to better themselves and to really show up as the best version of themselves, to add value to the organizations that we are in.
Yeah. You know what? Results speak for themselves. So
right, yeah.
When coaches are the ones who say, yo, guys, this process has helped me so much. Sure, maybe you don't see it physically, but emotionally, I've got so much more space to deal with work stuff. Spiritually, I am so much more grounded. Psychologically, I've got so many more capabilities in order to ensure that when there are situations that come up in the workspace, that I can deal with them without it flustering me, without it taking the whole day, without it stopping my progress. Coaches are your best salesmen, really. And I do think that shows through even to my practice. A lot of times it's people who come back and they're like, yo, like, phew, I've missed this voice of reason. And then I'm like, yeah, well, you do know that it's your voice, right? I'm just asking you a question that taps into you, because you are the same person that's coming up with the same solutions. But obviously, because it's the work I do, I also know how to ask you the question and hit you in a place where it's going to make you feel a little shaken and like, hey, ain't like, man, hey, phew, now I couldn't sleep for 2 days because I was just thinking about that. And that's literally the type of stuff that happened, right? So another thing that I always remind coachees is, FYI, if you're coming to do coaching, just know that it's like you're picking up another qualification that you're going to be doing in this time, because we're going to speak about stuff. I'm going to ask you about things on a level that's going to make you itch. And it's going to itch so much, you're going to want to solve that problem tonight. You will also most likely be quite exhausted in the evening on the day that you've had a coaching session, because thinking work isn't joking work, man. and you're thinking hard, and you have to fight that little voice while you think.
I'm curious to understand, the power of asking the right question. And because our brains, are designed to ask questions or to solve problems rather. And you solve a problem when you've got a question in mind of how can I do this better? How can I evolve, And I'm just wondering, can you sort of give us some practical questions, that are really powerful in how we can ask ourselves those questions in trying to evolve and become better?
How do you ask yourself those questions in order to evolve and become better?
Yes, so
one
sort
is
of
to
a way
remember-
that you would ask. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, first of all, you shouldn't try and emulate someone else, right?
Okay.
So you need to remember that you are whole, you are resourceful, and you are capable. Every problem that you come to, you are able to solve it. There are many different spiritual ways in which you look at it, right? Like in the Christian faith, they'll say, God will bring you somewhere and he's also going to push you through it.
Mm-hmm.
In Islam, they'll say, Inshallah, God willing. And you just need to trust that you can be your own version of a God. Know that if you take the time to think, you will ask yourself, oh, okay, why did this thing affect me? And it's sort of like, okay, ask yourself the 5 whys, literally. Why? Because you will not be able to ask the question Shari is going to ask you, but you surely will be able to ask the questions Tembela is going to ask you.
Right. And I'm wondering with that, the differentiator between an empowering question and a disempowering question.
It becomes
so the listener could be able.
Yeah. So you should not ask yourself questions that look for an explanation. Rather ask yourself questions that seek solutions.
Okay.
Yeah. And in seeking solutions, table many solutions. Be solutions driven. And tell yourself, okay, if this happens, what am I going to do differently? How am I going to do that?
Right.
Yeah. And recognizing that this is my value system, how will this action affect that value system? Or recognizing that behaviorally, this is the things I feel most comfortable doing. How will this action affect those behaviors? Or, oh, okay, my learning style is that I like to watch videos instead of reading books. So why am I going to ask someone to send me an article? No, man, let me just go and check on YouTube. Or someone send me a video. Let me understand this thing from watching YouTube. Work towards your strengths, right? Which is another discipline.
Yeah.
Strengths-based coaching. Work towards your strengths. But to know your strengths, you have to do the work yourself, right? Figure out, oh, okay, what has gotten me to where I am today?
And with that, is it like you're saying you can ask yourself questions and empowering questions, how seeking out for those solutions over and above coaching and that self-introspection? What impact or what role does self-help books empower one? Like, there's bestsellers out there whereby you can take a book, do your own self-assessment, and it will guide you. Like one of the other ones is like Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. And normally when you read that book, like if you read through those unconscious mistake that women do, you can actually see like, what, we all fall under this trap. And how can I navigate myself? What importance does that help? Or
Yeah. It's very important and it's very useful, right? You must always take in more and more and more knowledge, right? So, a big part of all the professional memberships that we have as professional coaching is CPD points. You need to have continuous development and growth as an individual, and also in relation to the coaching sphere. So self-help books for clients is important. It's essential because that's really what we're doing with you. It's being guided by someone else. So it's a little bit easier because someone else is taking you through it, right? But self-help tools are essential. That's where Google also comes in. There's checklists for a lot of things. There are questions that are already, there's templates available online in quite a few coaching websites as well. And those things are very, very helpful, right? So remember earlier on when I said that in trying to decide who you want to coach you or mentor you, you've got to do the work. The self-help books will help you do the work so that you are also clear on who you are. You've got answers in relation to who you are, where you want to go, what you want to do and how you want to get there. But maybe you just need a little bit more help in finding some clarity.
That's powerful.
Absolutely. And are there any books that you could sort of recommend for our listeners? Some that you have used personally or you know of that clients have used that have really given them results?
Yeah. Let me actually think about that one very nicely.
No problem.
So for me, book lists are important, right? And there's a really good book that I often use in my business coaching space, and it's called Peaks and Valleys by Dr. Spencer. That book helps a lot because it helps you to also look at yourself in relation to others, and knowing that, yeah, sometimes things are positive, sometimes things are negative, but while going through your journey, you need to ensure that you do well. And there's another book that really has helped. It's called The Culture of Honor. I'm actually trying to remember who the author was now. But I can't get to that in my head as well. And another writer in the behavioral space is called David White. So there's quite a few books that I've read in relation to him, and I do appreciate not only the perspective, right, but that we are seen as whole human beings, whole human beings. Nancy Klein has 4 books from my last recollection. She's also a great author in that space. The Time to Think lady, Nancy Klein. I enjoy reading Nancy Klein's Time to Think primarily because the principles of Time to Think helps you to not only be a better coach, but it helps you to be a better person. It helps me be a better facilitator. It helps me be a better friend, a better sister, a better daughter, because you teach yourself how to also create a safe space for others. And it's not only about you. Yeah, so that's some of the books I can think of from the top of my head.
Okay, cool. The Culture of Honor, is that the one by Danny Silk?
Silk, yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, that'll be great for our listeners just to take note of. So you mentioned Peaks and Valleys by Dr. Spencer. You mentioned The Culture of Honor by Danny Silk. You've mentioned Nancy Klein, A Time to Think.
Yes. And David White. White with a Y.
Okay.
Yeah. And then of course, so a big part of the work that we do, we read a lot of like articles from like Harvard Business Review, excellent leadership tools there. I like Daniel Goleman's work a lot. Goleman. He writes a lot on leadership. Another one of my favorite guys is Patrick Lencioni. And then there's Peter Senge. And I think so that also tells you, right? I don't follow books, I follow people. Because it helps you to also see stories consistently. See stories consistently.
Yeah, I guess what you're also saying is that identify with someone's writing style, the writing style that speaks to you. Rather focus on reading those type of books because they will be more motivational to you and you will get used to that style than trying to read something. Because obviously if you read a book that you don't understand the writing style and doesn't resonate with you, you are most likely to not even finish it or even struggle to interpret it into your own life.
It goes beyond that really for me, right? Because it's more about their school of thought and how do they apply psychology, and how do they incorporate the realities of life into the academic work that they do. Those are very important elements for me, because you also can't read everything for everyone, right?
No.
Yeah. So those things are quite essential for me.
Yeah. And with that, is there anything that's very important that you like to our listener to take away from today? And even if we were to visit the concept of the idea, let me repeat that for you. In the context of today's show is a bit tricky. It's about the idea: we inform and entertain, we develop and educate, we empower and support, we associate and network. From today's conversation, from that idea, what stood out the most for you?
For me, development, the word develop for me is key, right? Because it reminds us that there's always room for growth. The growth mindset is essential. That we need to work towards an improved pace of operation in all of who we are, not just some of who we are, start to end. So, yeah.
And I would say a lot of that does sort of point back to you as an individual, because you need to seek out what will develop you and empower you, and take almost like a sense of ownership over your own destiny. And, if you want to create a specific future, you need to be intentional about it, in terms of how you seek your mentors and people that can coach you and set up your life to succeed. That's something that a lot of my friends talk about a lot, in the sense that who are your thinking partners? Who are the people that are the closest to you, like your top 5 people that you speak to often? I mean, that will tell you already in terms of where your thinking is at and what sort of direction you are going in your life.
Yeah, right. And also those people who you have around you or close to you and in your space, what purpose are they serving? Because there will be, okay, this is my friend, we speak about business, so these are my 3 or 4 people in the business space. Like we all have training companies and we all do this and we all do that. And then these are my emotional buddies. Like, here we speak about our families. Here we speak about, this guy did this to me. This girl did this to me, blah, blah, blah. This is where you can go and cry, waya, right? Hence, you must be deliberate in the spaces you create around you. deliberate in who you choose to be around you, deliberate in why you are choosing them to be there, so that they serve your well-being holistically. And not so that they only keep getting things out of you, because life is a give and take. Your cup does need to be filled, even though you are there as a listening ear. Which reminds me of what I was saying earlier, that even for me as a coach, I have professionals, I have therapists that I have to speak to in order to also understand how I am digesting what goes on in our sessions, how I carry. There's some things I carry, there's some things I can just, wipe off and just keep it moving. But I do need other people to also hold me accountable to my own sanity. I need people to hold me accountable to my own emotional stability, psychological stability, physical wellness, spiritual wellness. And we must adopt that for ourselves as individuals.
And with the thinking partners, Thembela, is it, because obviously you can't go around explaining yourself to every person that you meet on the streets and the corridors. And with those thinking partners, it's all about how do you identify which one is the better one. I guess we look at positivity that comes there, or does it mean when you talk about the thinking partners, if some of them can tend to be negative, is it the people that you tend to disassociate with because it's part of you being deliberate about yourself?
Yes, like at some point, it also goes back to you have people around you sometimes for a specific purpose, and you need to know once that purpose is done or has been served, and it's time for that relationship to evolve into something else, and let that be. But in terms of having specific thinking partners, these are people that elevate your thinking, people that you've identified that they sharpen you, they help you, to understand. If you are interested in business, they help you understand business better because they are already well advanced than you are, so you get to benefit from them and they benefit from you. So you kind of really have to be very intentional about who these people are, because a lot of it is going to shape how you see the world, the perceptions that you now hold, it's really going to be shaped by those people.
Yeah, I guess we're also touching into the issue of networking. You need to keep your network as broad as possible.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Nourish it and maintain it such that whenever you need the thinking partners in any aspect of your life that you get challenged and you're able to approach these individuals in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess on my side, I had a lot of take homes. Like Shari was saying, you need to do your homework. Like what I gathered from this entire session is that you can't seek help if you don't know yourself. Otherwise, it becomes time wasted is never gained. That's one thing that always goes into my mind. So you will approach a coach or you will have a mentor, but if you do not have clear characteristics and clear development areas that you like from that person, it's as good as not as the relationship not existing. And I guess your mentors are also formal and informal, and some of them they unsolicited as thinking partners per se.
Shari, can I just ask you a quick question, right? Let's say I identify a potential mentor or a coach and things kind of go well in the beginning. What are some of the best ways to sort of like end things without, if things kind of go pear-shaped for whatever reason, let's say a line is crossed or a boundary is crossed, what are the ways that one can end that relationship without it, really sabotaging it in the future?
Having an honest conversation, truthful conversation, and authentic conversation, right? And that is a skill that one should carry in life in general, because things oftentimes don't go according to plan.
Yeah.
And it's simple things like returning an outfit okay, I thought it was going to look like this and it didn't, it's not fitting me right. And take it back, bruh. And that's the same way in which you should treat all relationships, including a professional coaching relationship, a relationship with a therapist, and say, Shari, thank you for our sessions that we've had. I've had a good time thus far, but our last session, I was uncomfortable that this boundary was crossed. It did this to me. This is how it affected me. So going forward, this is how I would like you to, number one, treat me. And it will most likely have to happen outside of here, because I would like to, as a result, in my sessions. And I do know that, maybe you'll be upset, but I would like to formally end our relationship, because now I feel uncomfortable, and it's something that's always going to sit in the back of my mind that, oh, maybe that will happen again. And this time it might happen and it's something more serious, etc. You have to learn the art of communication in all circumstances. And guess what, Tembelani? That happens a lot, eh? No, I'm lying to you. Not that happens a lot. It happens. It happens. Like I'm trying to think if I haven't, but I've heard of stories where individuals don't want to continue a coaching relationship, and as a result, what they do is they just disappear.
Sure.
That's also another way of saying.
But you see, I think it's so important for us to learn to navigate those uncomfortable conversations, and again, it goes back to us using our voices, when it matters, and being able to ask for what you need. For me, that's one of my key takeaways today, right, is the fact that, yes, it's, there's the saying that says that it's so hard to stand up when everyone else is sitting down. But it's so necessary to use your voice to speak up against, any form of, whether it's an injustice or you feel like there's a violation. It is so important for us to speak up, and because that's the only way that things will change.
True, definitely. I strongly agree with that. And it's important to also remember that it's easy to stand with others, but it's very difficult to stand alone. And and we must focus on affecting change, and change that matters, right? Change that matters to us. Change that matters to the here, the now, the youth of today, the millennial of tomorrow. We're going through a very, very difficult time regarding the pandemic. People are under heavy stress, and they are experiencing feelings they've never felt before, regardless of whether they are sick or not, right? Many people are in a state of anxiety, of fear, of discomfort. You haven't been able to mourn how you were used to mourning for your whole entire life. And it's a state of mind that we don't know when it's going to end. And for all of that, we do need to ensure that we also are forgiving of self, forgiving of others. Yes, we have to, in business. So that's the thing that we struggle with a lot. And those are conversations that coaches come with. Like, how do I tell this lady whose husband passed away 3 months ago that her performance has been poor since then? How do you? Because you're still a person yourself, and that that's not something that you can easily do and say. You can't just operate in that way, right? So, it's interesting. But beyond the interesting part is that we are human, right? We are whole, resourceful, and capable, and you need to know that all day, every day, that you will push through. You will be the light. You will be your own light. Be the light for others. Always ensure that you do your best. Yeah.
And how we need that right now.
Mm-hmm.
And leading.
You have 5 minutes left, colleagues.
Any closing remarks? 5 minutes, Sherry?
Yeah. Should I tell people where they can get me?
Yes, please.
I'm on LinkedIn as Shari Matera. There's a lot of noise here. So I'm on LinkedIn as Shari Matera. Or you can email me at shari@ssbconsult.co.za. So it's Sugar Bravo Consult.co.za. Yeah, man. And just a reminder that darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. So make sure that you are always the light for others and you lead with compassion.
And with the show takes place every month, every first Monday of the month from 18 hours to 20 hours South African time. And you can find myself and Tembela on LinkedIn. I am Shalmeji Pachani on LinkedIn, and Tembela, it's
Nangamso. Tembela Rosani. Thanks, Sikha.
Thank you. One of the closing thing, Shari, if I have to tell you why we laughed, I struggled a lot to pronounce Tembela's surname. So she would be like, Sakha, and I'm like, you know what? Pronunciation is very key. I can't say Tembela Rosani or Khosani. It's like, it's Khosani. So we took a lot of practicing. So now when I'm like, I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, so I guess
it's time for me to help you out.
Time for me to help you out. But yeah, I would like to thank the listeners for listening in, and we'll catch them. They'll catch us same place, same time next month. Thank you.
Next month.
Farewell.